You are being attacked by a giant crab monster. Do you dodge left or to the right?
I don't know. I mean, left? I guess?
You got eaten by the giant crab monster. Game over.
Come on. Okay, quick load.
You are being attacked.
Whatever, shut up. Right.
You have defeated the giant crab monster. Congratulations. As you venture out from the cave.
Okay. Thanks. What was the point of that? All that dead ending did was break my immersion and ruin the pacing of the novel. It didn't expand or add anything to the story at all. It was just pointless.
That's one of the sacred pastries you're holding.
Hello?
You must be one of the 4 light warriors.
Mr. Narrator?
Bakery, the prophecy foretold.
You're not listening to me, are you? Whatever. Let's talk about dead ends in vision novels. Welcome back, everyone. Last time we talked about choices and branching paths in VNs, how to best implement these, and why it's important to ensure that the reader can always have a decent understanding of what the outcome of their choices are going to be. Now let's talk more about what happens after you pick a branching choice, and some of the problems that will likely turn up if these are written in a confusing and convoluted manner. Can I safely assume that you're all familiar with what dead ends usually refers to in vision novels? Just for the 1% of you that aren't, dead ends are the moments when you pick an incorrect choice, and as a result the story then shortly ends with a game over screen. Quite often with someone from the cast dying in some horrible fashion. You then have to reload one of your save files to before you pick the incorrect choice and fix what you did wrong in order to keep reading. This is what we will discuss in this video. Dead ends in vision novels. Let's start by going back to that one moment in Ever 17 again and see how its bad ends were handled. We've already talked about how a majority of readers will get this choice wrong, because you cannot logically figure out what is the correct answer here, and you basically need a walkthrough to get it right. And more importantly for this video is also the fact that when you get it wrong, you've locked your playthrough to a bad ending about 3 hours later in the story. There are 2 major problems that follow because of this. For starters, the fact that the dead end doesn't show up until much later in the plot, and the story doesn't significantly change for a long time based on which choice you picked. It's basically only right at the end of the route where the plot makes a quick split, giving you either a good or a bad ending, depending on one decision you made several hours ago. This means that in order to reach the good ending, you need to reload back to the garbage choice, then fast forward past all the text and dialogue which you've already read. This is a very annoying waste of the reader's time, and it's an exceptionally effective way of killing their immersion in the story. But fine, whatever, let's just reload our save file, then get back to what we were doing and... oh, wait, that's right. You might not even know which file to load. This is the other major problem with the dead end caused by the dum-dum choice over here. There are several other choices between it and the dead end. As a reader, you're of course going to assume it was the last one you made that caused the bad end. So you are probably gonna rewind the story back to that point, try all of the other options available to you, fast forward a bit, and then you're stuck. So now what do? You've made dozens of choices throughout this storyline and you have no idea which one of them is causing the dead end. So unless you throw in the towel and just get yourself a walkthrough, which as mentioned in the previous video will not always be an option, you're not finishing this novel. So what can we do to avoid these problems? Well, step 1 should always be to not have arbitrary choices. Though that's basically what the entire last video was about, so let's not beat that horse anymore. And besides, Even if all the choices that can lead to dead ends have logical answers, there will always still be a small portion of readers who are going to pick the wrong answers, and we have to make their reading experience as smooth as possible. So the first thing we need to do is to ensure that the reader immediately knows which choice they need to go back to in order to continue the story, if they run into a bad end. I have 3 ideas for how to achieve this: not having any more choices after the reader has been locked to a dead end, using an autosave feature, or adding a Tiger Dojo-like section to the game. Let's begin with the first one. By simply not having any more choices after the reader has been locked to a dead end, the reader will always be able to just reload back to the previous choice, and then they'll be fine. As long as the reader just never runs into any of those ridiculous situations where all of the available options will lead to a dead end, that should be good enough. Another option is to simply include a feature that will let the reader automatically load back to the branching choice that locked them to the bad ending. I can't actually think of any visual novels that's done this, but I can't imagine that it would be too difficult to simply have the game detect when the players lock themselves to a bad ending. Then, once they reach it, just give the player a button that quick loads them back to the point where they picked the wrong choice, and then let them continue reading from there. This will ensure that the reader will never be uncertain about which save to reload, plus it would mean that you wouldn't have to constantly make new save slots for each and every single choice you encounter. And yet a third option, and potentially the most amusing one, is to have the game outright tell the reader where they made a wrong choice, i.e. the Tiger Dojo option from Fate Stay Night. See, in Fate Stay Night, there's a small game hints corner that you have the option of visiting each time you run into a dead end. Mechanically, it's there to explain to the reader which choice they need to go back to in order to continue the story. But it also serves as a great excuse for the writers to fit in some humor into the novel that would have felt completely out of place within the actual canon story of the novel. It's a pretty clever trick, which I would like to see more visual novels take advantage of. Now on to the second issue. Being forced to waste time fast-forwarding past sections that you've already read. Again with Ever 17, you remember that one of the other problems was that it was the same events that happened for a long time after the trash can choice, and as a result you had to waste a bunch of time skipping past text that you've already read. I can think of 2 solutions to this problem: writing new content for all of the bad endings, or just flat out not using bad ends at all. Let's begin with the latter. Just because a visual novel includes choices, you do not necessarily need to have any bad endings at all. You could just have the novel progress towards the same ending, but the way you reach that ending will differ significantly depending on which choices you made along the way. Imagine, for example, that if you fail to decrypt the password, rather than simply being locked to a dead end right there, you could have one of the other characters realize that there was a different method of accessing the mainframe that didn't require the code. Then the novel would go into a different scene where the characters had to hack the database from the server room or something along those lines, before the story would then eventually converge back to the main storyline. If crafted well, detours like these can give the reader an illusion of freedom, even if the novel is actually quite linear. As far as I know, a lot of story-driven games like Mass Effect, Deus Ex Human Revolution, and Tales from the Borderlands use this technique all the time. But moving on, if you do decide to include bad endings, another option is to always write completely new content for all of them. If the events following the incorrect decision at the paper code choice had been completely different from the canon plotline, then having to reload back to that point wouldn't be as annoying, because now you wouldn't have to fast forward past any unnecessary text. Now you could just read through it, as all of the events would be entirely new to you. This would of course require writing a whole lot of extra content for your novel, but honestly, this is also the way that I think that bad endings can be used to really elevate the story of VNs, and not just feel like some needless punishment for playing the novel incorrectly. Visual novels can utilize their bad endings to actually show what can happen to the world and its characters that the reader has come to love and care for. This would give a lot more weight and sense of urgency to the conflict of the story than simply hinting at a "this might happen if we fail" scenario. For example, Wouldn't it be interesting to find out what would actually happen to that city if the protagonist had failed to disarm that nuclear bomb? How did the world react? Did the region spiral into chaos and become a safe haven for criminals and terrorists? Did it lead to a global war? Did the stock market completely crash and lead to a global recession because of it? Some of my favorite moments in visual novels are all bad endings, where the story went the extra mile to show what would happen to the characters if they really made the wrong decisions along their journey. It can also be an excellent opportunity for character development, particularly for antagonists. In Fate's Day Night, for example, nearly all of Ilya's best moments, the scenes that depict her as a truly dangerous homicidal psychopath, those all took place during the bad endings. Anyways, let's finally summarize this video and bring it to a close before I bore any more of you to death with my endless ramblings. Much like branching story paths, dead ends shouldn't be forced into any visual novels just for the sake of having them. That will only annoy the readers, as poorly designed bad endings can easily lead to them being forced to replay sections that they've already seen before, and making them confused about which save to have to reload in order to continue the story. However, when used well, dead endings can be used to expand the story and show new sides of the characters. Basically, what I'm saying is that if the reader ever picks an incorrect choice, and I'm putting that word in very big air quotes, you shouldn't punish them for doing so. Rather, reward them with a new angle of the story, one which it would have been difficult to tell within the main plotline of the novel. In the next and final video of this mini-series, we're gonna look at some possible ideas for minimizing unnecessary time wasting in VNs. So, I'll see you then.